First of all, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. And I'll only make one apology. I'm an Aussie, I'm an Pom as well, but I have been a rugby supporter of New Zealand rugby for a long time, ever since I first stepped foot here 30 years ago. Unfortunately for anyone in Canterbury, and you can kick me out now, that team was the Hurricanes, who I met in the hotel last night where I was staying. And I'm glad I've given up rugby because I've now seen just how big these players are today, standing next to them in the lift. They are astonishing athletes. Whatever you are feeding them on in this country, it is working, okay? It really is. So look, my pleasure to be here today. I really want to talk to you about advanced manufacturing. Now I noticed getting up this morning, it was a bit chilly here, -1 I think, and beautiful sunshine, and we have closed the curtains. That's not designed so you can go to sleep. So what I might get you to do is everyone just stand up for a minute if you wouldn't mind. I'm going to play a little game. All right, and this little game is, there's no right or wrong, okay? There is one person in the room I know who has sat through this before, and Steve, this will test you whether you get all these phrases. But what I'd like you to do is, if you see words on the screen, okay, that you know the meaning of, and you could tell somebody else what they mean, then stay standing up. Okay, so it's a little test. We'll go with some easy ones first. Hashtag, emoji, podcast streaming, VR. Are we all good? It's okay, there's no shame to sit down, all right? You're all manufacturers and technicians in the room, this is great. But just think, it wasn't that long ago that a hashtag or an emoji wasn't part of our language, okay? Not that long ago. I only started using these things when my kids started using them. Try a few more. Blockchain. Oh, everyone's standing up with blockchain. That's quite impressive. I won't pick anyone out and ask it to test it because I struggle with the concept of blockchain. But wearables. Is that a suit? Hackathon? Uber, Airbnb? Bootstrap. Okay. Bootstrap is not something that's on your boot. Okay, I'll give you a hint. Something to do with software. Got a few more. Servitization, virtualization, SaaS, software as a service. Okay. Yeah. Digital twin. MooQ, here's a good one. That's got you all down. Now this has actually shown there is one person who has heard this before. Meet Steve from Sutton's in Melbourne, okay? So MooQ is that when artificial intelligence, like computers, can tell your mood. I don't know if you heard that Google talk the other day where Google rings up somebody and can read a conversation. We're heading that direction. There's a couple of others, peopleware and singularity. So I've heard of hardware and software, but peopleware is kind of a slightly spooky concept where we become a commodity. And then singularity, you know, perhaps that is the fifth industrial revolution, if there is going to be such a thing, where you can no longer tell the difference between people and artificial intelligence, androids, humanoids. You know, is that the Terminator moment? Well, I guess, you know, you can either look at that as a pretty scary thing, or you can look at it as an opportunity for the human race, for your business, for the opportunities here in New Zealand. So I just put that up there just to sort of frame the thinking that you know, if you're not keeping pace with even conversations that are happening out there, how are you going to keep pace with the rate of change and the rate of technology? Hopefully, many of you will have heard of this thing called Moore's Law. Okay, now applicable to semiconductors, goes back a long time, and it was this concept that the speed that a semiconductor or a computer could work at would double every 18 months and the cost would halve. Now I have a theory that Moore's Law is actually applicable to just about everything we are seeing at the moment. We are no longer living in a world where change is linear, but change is exponential. It was only 10.5 years ago that the iPhone was produced. Okay, can you imagine a world without a computer in your pocket? You imagine how that's changing now the world of manufacturing and technology, where there are thousands, if not millions of apps, and digital twins and all this language we see in manufacturing is relying on these devices. They didn't exist a decade ago. Okay? In fact, the iPhone didn't sell very well when it was first launched. For the first 3 quarters, it hardly sold. And then they opened up their app store. Okay? And the ecosystem is what then took the iPhone sales exponential. What's another trend we're seeing out there? We're seeing this thing called the Internet of Things, okay? Now, how many people are there on this planet? 7.5 billion people. How many connected things there are today? Well, let me tell you, it is many times a multiple of humans on the planet already. And if you've seen all these trends that we're talking about, maybe 50 billion connected devices, okay, well, Cisco's talking about maybe that becomes 200 billion. Okay, maybe with things like 5G technology, that really accelerates. And if you're in a business where you are selling devices that can be connected to the internet, or you're taking advantage of this technology, wow, what an explosion of opportunity for you. If you're not, are you missing out on the greatest trend or the greatest technological opportunity of our generation? Okay? And so we're seeing, I guess, this embedded in investment globally. I'm just going to touch on what's happening in terms of trends out there. These are not just manufacturing. But we're seeing massive investment, 1.4 trillion. I don't know how many numbers, how many zeros that is. Okay? Over a coffee, someone tell me later. But it's such an astonishing amount, I can't get my head around that. But 1.4 trillion investment in connected devices and the Internet of Things around the world. The next trend really surprised me, coming from manufacturing. You know, I've run lots of factories with lots of robots, and robots have been around in manufacturing for decades. So why would robotics be the next single biggest investment that we're seeing in terms of technology trends? Well, these are robots that can work with humans, okay? And they're not robots as like an articulated arm. This may be your car, okay? That it is a robot, right? Takes you to and from wherever you want to go. You no longer drive. You no longer even have a steering wheel, all right? You're just simply a passenger like you would be in a train. Massive investment in that space. Followed up by artificial intelligence, not surprisingly, and continued investment in computing power, okay? And that's really what's going to set the world light in terms of bringing these technologies into the fore. But why is this relevant? Well, because at almost every level, technology can help in some form. Now, some of this might be simply about getting some improved efficiencies in the business, all right? Some simple return on investment. But the real opportunities go all the way through to the new business models, the complete value creation, new markets, new opportunities that these technologies can create. And the great things about being in Australia and New Zealand is that a lot of these technologies actually remove that tyranny of distance in a heartbeat. The Internet of Things is at the speed of light. Okay, it's not at the speed of a ship. Now, the flip side of that is all of a sudden the rest of the world can trade with us, also at the speed of light. And so it is kind of a first mover advantage in this space. I guess I've come from Australian manufacturing industry, and I've served 25 years of my career in the automotive sector. And I just want to touch on, you know, where we sit in Australia in terms of manufacturing. This was the Model T Ford. We were the first country, okay, outside of the USA to build the Model T. We were the first country that Toyota decided to build a foreign factory in, right? So how on earth did we get to the point where all of a sudden we shut down car production in Australia? And what's interesting is that's left a very fragmented industry in Australia. We're in a situation where 94% of the manufacturers in Australia, we've got about 100,000 registered manufacturers, 94% of those roughly have less than 20 employees, okay? So when I hear New Zealanders talk about we lack scale, we've got an industry that's very fragmented, actually you go across to Australia, it's almost worse in terms of those statistics. And the biggest economy we serve is maybe 6-7 million people, and then it's a day's drive to the next biggest economy. So I think one of the things I've seen this week in New Zealand is companies actually really doing some amazing things that lack of scale drives you to do. It forces you to be ingenious. It forces you to get out of the world. It forces you to know how to build companies where 15% R&D is taken as the minimum that you'd spend. I've been to, I think, 3 or 4 companies this week in the last couple of days where that 95% export is actually the norm. I can't think of many companies in Australia where those metrics would apply. So I think one of the things we do have in Australia is we have a reasonable market to sell into. I think New Zealanders are hungry, more ambitious, have greater appetite for export, and fundamentally I think that's what's going to keep you growing in New Zealand on a really sustainable rate, as long as companies can take advantage of new technologies and continue to make themselves relevant. So what does Australian manufacturing look like? Well, about 10% of the population of the workforce works in manufacturing, so it's significant, even after the end of car production. 1.27 jobs, ranks number 1 in innovation and patent filing, okay? And interesting enough, we've had the longest run of expansion in manufacturing in Australia since 2005. We're now on 19 months of uninterrupted growth. Now that has come about while the car industry closed down. All right, a lot of people lost their jobs, but we have found ways to do and to grow our sector. And we are starting to get on the cusp of investing in this whole world of Industry 4.0. We have a huge way to go in this space. But those companies that are early adopters in this technology space are reaping productivity benefits inside their businesses and are starting to leverage new business models. Anyway, enough of Australia, apart from one last slide. Hopefully some of you may have seen this concept of a smiley curve, as we call it in Australia. This is a concept whereby if you are simply in the business of production, which is where a lot of manufacturers come from, the margin and the value add that you may get is probably at the lowest level you can achieve. And your competition is possibly the next 40-foot container from China, okay? If the only thing you're differentiating on is being a producer. And so what we are encouraging companies to do is to look at how they can get more integrated into the supply chain to create services they offer enabled by the products they make. Now that may not be setting up a full R&D center. Very few companies have the opportunity to do that. But it may be the opportunity for companies to start getting into marketing, distribution, but it could be all the way through to managing the end of life of their products. And what we're encouraging companies to do is to look at those opportunities to become a service provider as well as a producer. And the definition of manufacturing in Australia is very much shifting to be an advanced and digital manufacturer that's focusing on how you make something and how you service your customers, and less about what you make. All right, and that's really the message we're sending to markets. You can have a look at this on the CSIRO website. There's quite a few documentations that support this. But I guess one of the things we're very much pushing for is this whole concept of services enabled by production. There is a terminology here. Servitization is kind of the buzzword that's being applied in manufacturing, both in this region and internationally. But it's services enabled by production that allow you to create products of differentiated value. I think one of the things I've seen, I really like the concept, the way that Callaghan talk about manufacturing and niche is a sector that they talk about. And I've seen exactly that looking at New Zealand companies this week that have found amazing ways to find a niche way to service the world and are doing it better than anyone else can despite the geography, okay? And I think that's really the opportunity in this. It's about creating customer lock-ins. It's about knowing more about how your products are used in the market than your customers do. And so that really opens up another world when you couple it with the Internet of Things to move from a very traditional business model that actually the whole world of manufacturing is in. The model we've embraced for decades now is that we trade on the basis of selling one of something. Now that one might be in a box of 1,000, all right? But the price is generally around you're selling a product, okay? And it's a price per product or a price per kilo. And what you're seeing is you're competing fundamentally on price, on features, on cost, okay? Maybe on quality, maybe on a relationship or a reputation. What this Internet of Things allows you to do, however, is now to track the products you sell, okay? And to follow them during their life, and to gather data, and to adjust those products potentially in real time. Okay, it's a very different way of thinking how you sell products. What it's allowing companies now to move towards is an environment whereby they can get into a trading relationship with customers that's based on a service. Okay, it's an ongoing relationship because what you are doing as a supplier is fundamentally solving a problem your customer has, or creating financial value for your customer that you in turn benefit from because you get lock-in contracts. And we're seeing the world moving from a pay per product, okay, to a pay per outcome. And I'll give you some examples in this in a sec. We're probably, in some respects, some sectors are already on that journey where we're paying by subscription. So if you think about this, you don't download Microsoft Office and pay a few $100s, you get Office 365, okay? You don't buy an iPhone generally anymore. You subscribe to a plan and your iPhone gets thrown in for free. So we're already on that journey where we're now paying on a subscription basis, but we're not quite there where we're paying on outcome, okay? Do you pay Microsoft for a complete malware-free month, okay? And 100% performance, no downtime? No, you don't yet, because they probably wouldn't make as much money as they do if you did. But that's the world we're moving to. So I'm going to give you some examples. Probably the best known example is Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce and GE no longer sell jet engines, okay? So imagine this in the boardrooms of Rolls-Royce one day where some bright spark comes in and says, hey, I've got a great idea. we're going to give away these $20 million jet engines for free, okay? Is that all right? And we're going to rent them, and we're going to maintain them, and then the people that use them are going to pay us based on how many hours these engines fly, okay? Imagine how the CFO would have handled that, okay? Quickly get the calculator out. How much is that? Well, that's just billions of dollars, billions of pounds. How on earth could you do that? So any model that's changing this has got to disrupt the thinking at all levels of a business, right the way through from the people that lend you money, the boards, all the way through. But without that disruption, we'll never get any change. Now, I've never been in a business that sold a $20 million anything, all right, as a single product. So I struggle to get my head around that. Another example I do like, consequently, is this Michelin model. Now, Michelin make tyres. Tyres are, I'm not going to discredit tyre engineers, but they're that simple a product as a commodity that we haven't made tyres in Australia, despite making cars for probably a decade. Right? They've all come in from overseas markets. Michelin put microchips into their tyres in Europe and provide the tyres free of charge to the truck hauliers. All right? And they track things like temperature and pressure and tread depth and all the usual stuff you'll track with a tyre. Okay? And they service those tyres, they repair them, and the truck hauliers pay them for kilometres, fuel efficiency and safety. And they are getting better fuel efficiency and better safety as a result. Now, I bet you Michelin probably knows more about how those trucks are used and where they're going than the truck hauliers do. So who owns the data? So at the heart of it, they're still making tyres, but they're now selling a very different model to a customer, and they're completely locked in. Do you think those hauliers can now get rid of Michelin and replace them by Bridgestone or a Chinese manufacturer? Very hard to do, isn't it, when you're actually locked into that ecosystem? And a few more. If you're a seed manufacturer, do you get paid for a packet or a bag of seeds, or do you get paid for the yield from that field? Because fundamentally, that's what the farmer wants, isn't it? Do you get paid for a 50-cent vacuum-formed packaging tray, okay, for food packaging? Or do you get paid based on longevity and an assurance that that fruit or vegetable will reach the consumer completely undamaged? In fact, it can last longer in the packaging, and that's what you sell, is lifetime of that product. You look at other things, vitamins. You know, if I'm getting on a plane later and I go to the pharmacy, the chemist at the airport, and they say, I said, I like some Sudafed, I'm all bunged up. And they say, we can do Sudafed, $30. Or we can do our own brand, all right, for $15. Which one would you like? Oh, by the way, we've got this new thing, $65, okay? But it's guaranteed, okay, that you're cured. And what you do is you send a message through your phone app as you're boarding the plane to say yes or no, your sinuses are cleared, and we only dock your credit card at that point in time. Now, if you've ever flown on a plane with sinuses, blocked sinuses, what would you do? I'd pay that 65. I'd probably pay 100, actually, if I had a guaranteed cure. So think about it in terms of your products, whether business you're in. How can you move to a model whereby your customers are paying you or consumers are paying you for an outcome? Paint. You know, do you buy a tin of paint, or do you pay based on colour and lifestyle? If you're a chlorine manufacturer, okay, are you selling chlorine, or actually are you selling children's health? Okay, it's a long bow. How do you earn revenue from that? But it starts to change the thinking. So really, servitization is a concept of having a competitive strategy of services for sale attached to or enabled by products you make. So it doesn't mean you don't make things. At the heart of this is manufacturing. It's the business model that's changing. And it's software and Internet of Things allows you to do that. Here's a real world example from Australia. This company, Smartline, they make endoscope drying cabinets. Now, endoscopes are things that go in your mouth and up the other way. Oh, geez, I nearly pulled my microphone out then. Not the most pleasant things to think about, but they're real world things. They ship these cabinets that are fundamentally glass and aluminium around the world, full of air. Okay, well, we haven't made fridges in this part of the world for a long time because they're quite expensive things to ship around the world when they're full of air. These guys have come up with a concept whereby they're looking to a model where they don't sell the cabinets anymore, they sell software as a service. So these cabinets are all connected to the internet, and from Australia they track temperature, humidity, pressure of the cabinets. They're now putting connected devices on each scope, so they know where every scope is around the hospital and can trace them. All right? They now sell to the hospital the data that the hospital needs to evidence they're meeting compliance standards, cleanliness, and they know where everything is. Nothing gets lost. All right? It's a transformative business model. At the heart of it is software as a service. They've created an app to do this, and they're connecting their devices to the internet. They've got massive export opportunities in something that's a very niche application at the end of the day. At the heart of it, they make cabinets. So, onto this thing called the fourth industrial revolution. Now, I'm not going to talk about what the first and second and third was. I will challenge, however, a bit of thinking about this revolution question mark. I want to just highlight something, that it was about a century between the first and the second industrial revolution. Okay? It was another century between the second and the third. We're not sitting here in 2070, are we? Okay, so this fourth industrial revolution has taken place in less than half the time, 40 years, less than half time of all the others. And the reason why we like to draw this curve as a little lick up, it's similar to those exponential curves, is I don't think it's a revolution. All right, revolution tends to be things you look back on at a point in time and say, whoa, that was a massive change, wasn't it? I think we're just on an exponential curve from now on, and I don't think there is a fifth. I don't think we'll ever look back and say, we saw the start of the fourth. But I think it's not a destination, it's a journey. And I guess that's a theme in terms of anyone investing in this space needs to take on board. So what do we see as Industry 4.0? Well, there are stacks of documents, great stuff out there. Everyone describes it a little bit differently because, of course, everyone wants their place in the world and their relevance. There is one document that CSIRO does in Australia, you can download it through our website, that actually describes really well in manufacturers' terminology for businesses what the fourth industrial revolution, Industry 4.0 is, and demystify these terms. And it's well worth a good read. I guess we see Industry 4.0 as, not to oversimplify it, but nothing more complex than a set of tools and technologies that you can apply to a business model. Okay? And they range from 3D printing to all sorts of other things. I guess I like to describe Industry 4.0 as almost like a deck of cards. Okay? Who here's played card games? All right? Yeah? Yeah? I think we all have at some point. So there's 52 cards in a deck. Every card has a unique purpose. Some games you play cards individually, other games you play cards as a hand, or they connect together, they have a strategy. But what is the point of playing a card game if you don't know why you're playing, if you don't know the rules, if you don't have a strategy? Okay? The card games is simply the what you do, the cards are simply the what you do, but all the thinking and planning and leadership and motivation all comes from up here. And we see Industry 4.0 to demystify it. It's nothing more than a set of tools and technologies that you can apply, but you need to know why you're doing it and how you're going to do it before you jump into the what. But because we engineers, we love terminologies, I guess to summarize, it's really about industrial digitalization, okay? Industrial digitalization, and it's about the real-time integration, people, machines, and things. And that's the simplest way. I've heard other descriptions, operating technology meets information technology. There's lots of great descriptions out there. But I guess what I want to do is sort of demystify that it's not about the technology itself. And Industry 4.0 is not new. I've come out, as I said, of 25 years in the automotive industry. And when I came into this job, people were talking about this thing, Industry 4.0. I said, what's that? What's Industry 4.0? And they started to go through it, and I read up. I said, I don't get this. What's this revolution business? Because back in 1991, I did a final year research project in my degree. Now I'm showing you how old I am, okay? On manufacturing simulation, where we did a simulation on a computer of a shop floor and we changed things around in the shop floor as a result. In 1996, I sat in a virtual reality studio in the UK, all right, designing cars. We wore glasses. It was clunky and slow, but it was 3D, it was virtual reality. Jump forward into 2001. We're designing seat production lines in Australia with RFID tagging and recording so we can gather traceability data as it goes through the system. Jump forward one more. 3D printing. We were doing this in 2002, 2003 for prototyping in polymers. So what's new about this whole Industry 4.0 thing? Well, it's the power of computing and the cost base that has changed dramatically, okay? You don't have to buy a $500,000 robot anymore, all right? You can buy robots now for as low as $1,500. A UR might cost you $30,000. All right, and they can work with people. They don't have to be behind light guards. That's what's changed in this space. And I think that's why people like to call it a revolution, because the opportunity has never been there like it has been in the past. So what are those technologies? Well, in Australia, we simply group them under 5 banners. Sensors and data analytics, advanced materials, smart robotics, additive manufacturing, and augmented and virtual reality. But again, just even describing the technologies is designed to get people interested on the hook, but it's not about the technologies itself, it's what you do with them. And we're seeing that technology, we're seeing 3D printing now taking place in hospital theatres, okay? Is this manufacturing? Well, it's not in a factory, but it's applying all the manufacturing technologies. It's still a manufacturing process and will require manufacturing skills and resources. We're seeing farmers now recruiting mechatronics, robotics engineers. Okay, these aren't traditional farmers. We're seeing automotive companies getting into solar and water. We're seeing autonomous vehicles, drones and so on using in the mine. Australia's leading the world in some of this technology. We're seeing robots. This is a Perth company, Fastbrick, that's making potentially the humble brickie redundant. Or maybe not. Maybe the brickie actually learns how to program the robot and come up with designs that a human on their own could never do. You know, is that where we're heading, where it's that melding of technology and people? We're seeing 3D printed buildings. If you don't believe it, this is happening in China, and it's happening in Dubai, and it's happening around the world. 3D printed buildings. We're seeing 3D printed food that you could never make any other way. Okay? And I guess even in New Zealand, we're seeing that you can take advanced manufacturing everywhere and anywhere, including climbing walls and ceilings. This fantastic company, Invert Robotics, making waves around the world with robots that can climb walls and ceilings. Okay? So manufacturing is now everywhere. So what do we do as a CRC? Well, our mission is to help catalyse transformation of Australian manufacturing, to take manufacturers into very much that advanced and digital world. And we do that in two ways. We have, a bit like Callaghan and others, we have cash we put on the table for industry to do research projects with Australian universities and CSIRO. But we do have another program within our CRC, which is a transformation program. It's about education and awareness. And it's about, you know, talks like this. One of the things we caution companies, particularly on Australia, is that you can dive into investing in Industry 4.0. But again, that goes really back to the what. If you haven't looked at why you're doing it, your leadership, your management, your culture, your continuous improvement, and you haven't looked at how, your strategy, your business model, how you go to market, understanding what your customers want and so on, then you might be at risk of diving into something and having the wool pulled over your eyes that actually isn't really suited for you. And so we try and encourage companies, particularly the smaller ones, to think very much through this journey. And it doesn't mean they shouldn't get some sensors, connect their machines to Wi-Fi and get on the journey. But before they make those big investments in software solutions, investments, and think about traditional investment models, maybe they need to look at it a bit differently. So I guess we see Industry 4.0 on two levels. One is on a value proposition. And don't worry about taking photos or making notes. I'll make these slides available to people. But we really see there's a great opportunity for optimizing productivity in factories, all right? Saving energy, getting data. It's kind of lean version 2, I've heard, you know, wrapping lean in Industry 4.0. There's also an element of risk mitigation where you can now see very deeply into your supply chains with the right sort of electronic interfaces and so on. Drones in warehouses, continual stock takes. The more, I guess, exciting opportunity for those companies that understand this technology and get on the journey is the external value creation. And that is really about additional services that you can offer, from R&D to Internet of Things to tracking your products, that in turn may open up brand new markets that you had never considered before. Think of an Uber and Airbnb, okay? How they created fantastic markets for them that never existed beforehand. That's what this technology can do, but fundamentally it's about leadership and business models at the heart of it. So how do you get started? Well, this is a picture of a lathe from 1954 in Germany, okay? Is it Industry 4.0? I don't know. But has it got sensors on it that's connected to a little Wi-Fi device that I can, on my iPhone or iPad from New Zealand, log on and see how that machine is performing? Okay? Rotations, energy usage, downtime. It's a connected device. It's actually very simple and low cost to get started and get people thinking in your business on a digital basis. So I like to, I guess just to finish off, thoughts on, you know, do you stay in the darker side or do you head towards the light side? Okay, we've got the sun shining through those windows there. And I like to just sort of talk about my reflections, having come from manufacturing industry, and now I talk about Industry 4.0, what it is and what it isn't. And so for me, I was as guilty as anybody. If someone had said to me, I'd like to come and talk to you about sensors and software, I'd have said, my finance manager, they look after IT, go and have a chat with them. And as CEO, that was probably the biggest mistake I would have made, because I now understand that this has to be at business owner, general manager, CEO, board level, investor level. It is a business strategy entirely, okay? And that's where it's got to be investigated at. I'm very good in a manufacturing environment about optimizing each unit of production. Okay? That's what we do in manufacturing. That's what we're great at. This is about connecting the workplace, machinery, people, suppliers, customers in an ecosystem that is transparent. I'm very good at getting data that is local data, lagging data. You know, I know tomorrow how my machines have performed today, the output of my shift. This is now about having access to real-time information wherever I am in the world, okay, in real time. I'm moving from an environment whereby I've been very much self-sufficient. I buy machines if I want technology. I don't let it onto my factory. And this is now an environment where I'm opening the doors to say, I've got to effectively collaborate because I don't know this world and I don't know this future. Who can I buddy up with and partner with that we can create a 1 + 1 = more than 3? Change is linear, change is exponential. Okay, it's a different way of thinking. You invest in smart technology, okay? You buy machines, you get the technology with it. This is about smart technology utilization. It's not necessarily about buying the machines, it's accessing the technology in some form. We're moving into an environment where we live in a world of known risks. Occupational health and safety, downtime in manufacturing, suppliers, customers, exchange rate. These are new risks. You know, cybersecurity, just to name one, okay, that we all need to understand. We're moving in an environment whereby we've looked at opportunities for improvement within our factory. This is now opportunities everywhere. Again, the Airbnb, Uber model, just to quote some real massive world examples. We've had a focus on very much what you make as a producer. This is really about how you make it, but also exploring that whole world of servitization, that can you do more than simply being a producer. And we've been extremely good about focusing on cost and performance, all right, to make sure that that 40-foot container from China isn't going to take our business. This is now focused not so much on the technology, but on people, leadership, and management, all right? And that's really what we try and do before people jump into these digital investments. I guess as a final message, and I'm plagiarising something that I heard about in the UK when I went over there to find out what they're doing to get manufacturers into this space. And they said, David, I'm absolutely with you. Your focus on leadership and strategy is absolutely right, because we find that if you apply digital to a broken thing, okay, you're likely to end up with a digital broken thing. Okay? And on that note, I will thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope that's just changed your thinking in some way about what the opportunities are in this space. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, David. May I invite you over here for a brief chat? And I just want to re-emphasize both to people in the room and on watching us on the webcast, please do keep the questions coming. I've got about 10 minutes now with David, and so we hope to shoehorn in quite a few questions. Although I'm still struggling to get past the Internet of Endoscopes. There must be some privacy issues in there. Anyway, I'm not sure.
Probably are, but the reason I like that is because it is a real-world example, and it's an example of a company that you wouldn't think could be competitive from Australia, shipping boxes of glass and aluminium across the globe. Because you'd think that would be done in China these days. So what have they done to their business to completely transform the thinking?
It's a brilliant story. Yeah, absolutely. Can I, first of all, thank you for that wonderfully logical and insightful survey of the landscape there, and a very helpful section there at the end about the journey that companies can be on. But can I ask a question that kind of underpins all that, about how a region of a country, or even an individual city, certainly a whole country, maintains an industrial infrastructure so that when a manufacturer needs a specialist custom-made component or needs a particular piece of technology and they need it supplied and supported, how do we best make sure that we're maintaining that ecosystem at a time of very fast technological change?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and at the heart of it, I think, is investment in skills and development within manufacturers. Manufacturing is going to evolve over time. If you take one of the examples there, I talked about the medical example. Factories today that make hip replacements, for example, why would you make that in a factory when it's not customized for the patient? When technology allows you to customize it just in time and to print it at the hospital based on an actual scan of that patient you're treating. So what we're going to see is manufacturing become very much sort of decentralized and And arguably, in your homes, on the farm, on ships, we're going to see it in car dealerships, whereby, you know, if you have a European brand of car and you have a low-speed crash, how long does it take you to get a replacement headlamp? Right? It might take 6 or 8 weeks. And if it doesn't, if you get it on the day, how much stock is someone really holding, and who's really paying for that? Well, you are ultimately as a consumer. So imagine a world where that part could be taken off and a plastic boss 3D printed and regrown on the back of it, and it goes back on the car the same day. Wouldn't that be an amazing thing to happen? So I think the investment in skills are what we need, and the traditional sectors that have always bolstered manufacturing, such as the tool-making industry, we're already seeing tool-making moving into those people that are now specialists in things like 3D printing, prototyping, and creating new services. But without the investment in skills, and almost the conversion of traditional manufacturing and shop floor skills into people that can collaborate and effectively use digital tools and robots and so on, humans will never think about what the next business model is, and we'll be dead and we'll lose big sectors of the industry.
There's a question here from Richie. With AI and presumably other technologies too, potentially taking existing jobs, how do you prevent a human bias from creeping into the decisions about how to move on in technology?
Yeah, I think you can go back to the second and third industrial revolutions to say that yes, there was a lag in terms of investing in new technology, and yes, there were jobs lost. But those jobs eventually came back in spades once that technology had been adopted. So robots have been in factories since the 70s. I mean, the Japanese put in robots, PLC controllers, and that automated a whole load of things that humans had done. I think that there's enough evidence now in markets such as the UK and Germany to say that, yes, initially jobs went, but actually there have been several times more jobs created as a result of smart technologies and automation, particularly in the UK, than were taken in the first place. I guess that's where government has a role to play nationally around standards and legislation, that we don't let artificial intelligence run ahead too fast, because ultimately the more sinister aspects of computer control will take over. And the last thing we want is, when we're in autonomous vehicles, for someone to be able to hack those vehicles or for the vehicles to do something that they're not programmed to do. I think the real opportunity in this Industry 4.0 is that harmony between people and robotics, artificial intelligence. And I've seen 2 or 3 examples of companies this week up in Auckland and in Christchurch where they're finding that balance. They've got AGVs, they've got small handheld robots. No jobs have gone. In fact, the jobs have been enhanced because the people are not doing things that arguably are dumb, dirty, and dangerous. But it is a real concern, and I think it's one that manufacturing is going to have to deal with, because manufacturing is going to be at the heart of those investments in technology. And I often get asked, a robot's going to take my job. The evidence from other countries is that that's not the case, and in fact it creates new jobs, but there is a process you have to go through before that normalises.
Thank you. A question here from Mo about, in terms of your work at the Innovative Manufacturing CRC, are you engaging largely at a sort of an operational level with companies and or with the sort of the C-suite?
Yeah, we try to engage more with the C-suite. We're not a training provider. What we try and do is get companies at the C-suite level, general manager, business owner level, to think differently. If they start exploring the use of these technologies, most manufacturers are, they like cause and effect, they're very tangible, they like to touch and feel things, they're very data driven. And once they start to explore things, you do find manufacturers start to quite quickly adopt things because they can see the benefits and the risks and opportunities. I think the challenge with this digital world is that as a manufacturer, I do like to touch and feel things, and the digital world is inherently intangible. And so what we probably don't have enough of in Australia yet, and I know New Zealand is probably similar, is we don't have enough case studies or role models of companies that have already taken this plunge and are happy to showcase and demo what they're doing, which gets a lot more of the massive companies going, because they say, oh, it's not that hard. It's not that expensive, it's not that difficult, and I'm not going to lose a lot of people in the process. In fact, this is going to be a great outcome for me. And I think what we're both lacking as countries are enough of those examples to get the critical mass of industry forward in this investment.
A very interesting question here, which is from David, which is the essence of it is, yes, all of this technology can help a company deliver a lot more value to its customers. But how do you then balance that versus that sense of a lock-in? And so the customer's going, well, this is great, but I'm feeling a bit locked in here. How do you strike that balance?
I think you've got to have you've got to keep having the conversations with the customer. And in fact, not just with the customer, but potentially with their consumers or their customers as well. If you can't put your mind in the minds of your customer and almost be there solving their problems before they've realized they've got problems. And again, it sounds a bit fairy tale, but I've visited companies this week in Auckland and Christchurch who are doing just that. You don't get to be a 90-95% exporter if you don't understand and aren't solving problems that your customers have. So as long as you keep having that discussion, and that's nothing to do with the digital world, it's about understanding how you can create financial value for your customer that in turn can be good for you. That's the Pandora's box at the moment.
Yeah. One last question from Gavin, and this is about burnout. When you're talking to companies with and individuals in the companies that are just seeing this exponential rise of technology, and they're kind of going, you know, you've hardly coped with the latest technology before you're moving on. How do you encourage them on the journey?
I think for the first time in any of these industrial revolutions, in fact, probably the first time in years, consumers, you know, we outside of work, our children, people in our factories are now using technologies that we don't yet have in the workplace. So you buy a Samsung phone, you get a VR headset thrown in on a deal, okay? Who doesn't have iPads and iPhones out there? Who's running businesses where they don't let their employees use those iPhones or iPads or explore how they could use it? I guess the point is we're living in a world where everyone is far more digitally savvy than we probably as business owners or business managers give people credit for. If you can unlock that power within the organization, and again, I've seen companies this week who have done just that. They have implemented, for example, small automatic guided vehicles in their factory, and it's the employees who are now coming up with more ideas of what this technology can do. That's a fantastic situation to get into, but you'll never get there unless you start to harness the ideas from the employees, because we're all in a digital world. And yet, in the factories, I'm as guilty as anybody. If someone had said to me, David, could we put some iPads on the shop floor to do stock count? I'd have gone, you must be joking, all right? You're not going on Facebook, you're not going on Wi-Fi, you're only going to drop them, okay? I don't trust you, I don't want you playing around machine settings. And I would, as guilty as anybody, as a CEO of a business, saying no. And yet, actually thinking it through, what am I really holding back, and how damaging is that to the culture I'm trying to build, particularly when you've got millennials come into your business and this is the only world they've ever known.
So we should all go home and make sure there's a robot vacuum cleaner and a 3D printer at home, so that all the family can have fun, and then come back to work energized on Monday morning.
Don't take me as an example, because I do talk this whole world. I don't have a robot cleaner. I do the ironing myself, and I don't let my 9-year-old daughter have an iPhone. And I sit there and think, I stand up here and talk about this technology. Should I be letting my 9-year-old daughter have an iPhone? Am I actually holding her back?
Yes, you are.
I probably am in many respects. Yeah. So I guess it's look, everyone has to find their own way. I don't know. I'll never know. I can never advise a particular business on how they need to do things. Every business is unique. It's really the quality of the leadership and how that leadership is pulling the talent from within and external to their business to explore new ideas, and then look at what the technology can do for them, as opposed to simply the other way around and saying technology is my answer.
Yeah. Look, I'm sorry to have to cut the conversation short. We're slaves to the schedule.
All good.
Rightly so. Thank you hugely for your insight, both professional and a little bit of a personal one at the end. I'll talk to you afterwards about your daughter. Sorry, that's right. A very big hand for David, please. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.